Hey, this is Rudy Mendez, aka Live Bandit. I'm here with Mr. Mark Noblet, who I met several years ago at a meet and greet with people who were contemplating doing gastric surgery. He was one of the speakers there, and he was riding a cycling. He was wearing a cycling kit, and I used to cycle a lot at that point in my life. I still do, but I used to cycle before my gastric surgery, and it was very interesting to me because as a cyclist, we have to eat. And doing that gastric surgery, it was like taking away food. And so that's what really intrigued me about Mr. Mark here. And then a couple years after that, I actually met him at Tour de Cure, where he was, I think you were like the chairperson at that point. And so it was kind of interesting that, our lives had crossed again. Which really led for me to believe that he was supposed to be in my life at that point. So I've got Mr. Mark here because he's a fellow alcoholic and a fellow cyclist. He has been 38 years sober, and he's actually got a triple addiction, which is alcohol, smoking, and food. So do you want to add anything?
Those are all that's my triple addiction. The funny thing is that the only one, the smoking one, I kicked about 10 years ago, and about the same time I started with working on the food addiction. So I don't ever recommend kicking two addictions at the same time.
It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. But I tell you what, whenever you are a smoker and you quit smoking while quitting another addiction, you have a 75% chance, 75% more likely chance that you will kick both of them.
Well, the good thing about that for me, because it also involved a tremendous weight loss. I mean, I've lost 280 pounds. I was 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Is that meant I was getting rid of my whole wardrobe, right? So all my smoky stuff, even down to like shoes and everything, it just invades everything. Yeah. So all my smoky stuff was gone, and so that was very helpful. So I guess there were some bonus things in kicking two addictions at once.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So how long ago did you have the gastric surgery?
It'll be 10 years, the 2nd of December of 2018.
Wow. Okay. And you've lost quite a bit of weight, so that's a great job. Right. And do you attribute a lot of that to your cycling? Plus the surgery?
Well, okay, so I had the surgery, and then I started going to the gym. As soon as the doc would clear me, like 5 days after my surgery, I was in the gym. And I got a little bit focused on the gym, and because I was very fortunate to have 6 full weeks off after my gastric bypass. And so I decided to take that time to really work on and try to establish those new habits. And so I got in the gym. I was in the gym 35, 40 hours a week. And I would do weird things. Like I would get on the bike and then I started finding myself saying, okay, if you can lift for an hour, if you'll lift for an hour, then you can ride the bike for an hour. If you'll get on the treadmill for an hour, then you can ride the bike for an hour. Okay. If you'll get on the stair climber like that. And then I started thinking, well, this bike is pretty good exercise. And then I thought, well, maybe if I like it this well in the gym, I'd really like it out on the road. And then I went out and bought my first road bike and never went back to the gym. So yeah, I love the cycling. It hits all the right cylinders for me.
That's cool. That's cool. How often do you ride a bike? And about how many miles do you ride a week?
Do I have to answer this question truthfully? Is my wife going to see this? I try to ride 5 to 6 days a week. Okay. I typically take Fridays as an enforced rest day. And then if my wife isn't working on Sundays, then I won't ride on Sundays, and we spend time in the afternoon. But usually, if she's working, which she often does, she's in retail, I'll get a ride in on Sunday afternoon. So more weeks than not, 6 days a week.
6 days. About how many miles do you ride a week?
Well, a lot of that is governed by the time of the year and how much daylight there is, right? So if in the really good long day time of the year, I'm riding 250, every once in a while getting up to 300.
Okay.
And then sort of the more fall and winter time of the year. You know, I'm happy with 200, and I'm satisfied with 150.
Okay, so I mean, you're pushing 40 to 60 miles a day.
I ride my daily rides are usually in the fall time of the year when the days are shorter are usually in the mid 20s.
Okay.
And then in the when the days are longer, more like the mid 30s. And then I try to do, well, this year my goal is to do 12 centuries. So and I have 11 in, so I got to get one more in before the end of the year.
And by the way, if you don't know what a century ride is, it's 100 miles in one day, which is a pretty good feat and a good goal to hit. And how long was your shortest century so far this year?
My shortest century so far this year, I averaged 18.2 miles an hour. So
wow,
you can do the
you
can do the math.
You cooked it that day.
Well, the good news at the 18.2, or the way I was able to do that is that I happened to be riding with a group that day. Most of the time I ride solo.
Right.
Most people, even mini cyclists, if you say let's go do a century, they're like,
whatever.
I don't think I'm that crazy.
Well, and I know the way that you ride and how you ride is by mapping out where the Starbucks are.
Well, that's what people seem to think, and the honest truth is, people do give me a hard time about Starbucks, and I do like Starbucks. But a part of the reason I like the places that I go to, and it's particularly the places that I like check in on Facebook and give some, I call it social media blood, is because they're cycling friendly.
Right.
And Starbucks will not even look twice at you to refill your water bottle. Right. They don't mind if you come right through in your cycling kit and smell like who knows what, and use their bathroom. Yeah. They, without ever buying a thing, they don't mind that, you know. And so I appreciate that, and I do. I drink a coffee when I go there, right? But and so and Starbucks is very, very friendly to cyclists, and in our part of San Antonio, they are ubiquitous. They're just nice, easy places to in and out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. So that's a little bit about Mark and his cycling adventures, a little bit about his gastric surgery, and just a real little snippet about his addictions. So we're going to get a little bit into the addiction side of Mark, and I've got a series of questions. I've got 6 questions that I'm going to ask him that I've already asked him, and we've talked about a little bit, but then I've got one serious question that I have not told him, and you might figure out which one that is. Okay? So Mark, when did you realize you were an alcoholic / addict, and that's including food? And who was it harder to admit to, you or someone else?
I grew up in a family of alcoholics, so I knew what alcoholism looked like on the inside. You know, one of the things that oftentimes people don't know is that, you know, there are a lot of times when you see an alcoholic on the outside, or you know an alcoholic casually, you almost think they're maybe a fun person, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, unless you live with that person, you don't see what that looks like. Right. You don't see the ugly parts, right? So I grew up in that environment, and then as I finished high school, went to college and things like that, I suddenly started to find myself drinking more and more and more, and then drinking very, very regularly. And then I won't say that I ever got to the place where I felt like I had to drink to get through the day, but I was certainly working hard to make excuses to drink to get through the day, I guess is a good way to say that. And then on the New Year's Eve, after my 21st birthday, some friends and I went out. We went to a bar. We started buying shots. It got out of control, and I literally ended up in you can call it toilet hugging, you can call it worshiping at the feet of the porcelain goddess, however you want to call that, but really, really sick. And it started out with all of a sudden I had this like somebody put a mirror up to my face experience, because I was all of a sudden, for the first time that I could really remember, exhibiting all those behaviors that I had grown up with and had said, oh, I would never do that, right? And so I literally prayed that prayer and said, God, if you let me live through this night tonight, I will get this under control, and I will not have another drink. And I guess I was, in a place in my addiction that I could do that, right? And I could make that work. And so I did it. And I did, like 5 years later, I did try to go to a meeting, and go through the AA process. And honestly, it wasn't something that, was kind of, it didn't resonate with me from my personal journey standpoint. Mm-hmm. And, I always tell people, and I'll tell everybody watching this, that this is nothing I say is meant to be prescriptive or proscriptive. Right. It is only intended to be descriptive of my journey and what worked for me. It may not work for everybody.
And that's perfect. And that's perfect because, first off, those foxhole prayers, that was probably one of many previous to that. And you probably haven't had too many after that.
I don't, that's kind of where I am today. And I was a smoker and had been a smoker for 40 long years. And I was a passionate, committed smoker. Ask people who know me. I used to make jokes about things like nobody likes a quitter, stuff like that. And I smoked 2 packs a day. And, oh, wow. And if I was working on a big project, like I work from home, if I was working like in my kitchen at my desk on a real big project or something, it wasn't unusual for me to look up and have smoked, 4 packs of cigarettes, over the course of a day or something. So
okay,
it was a serious addiction. And then my food addiction, I have always loved food. I was always the chubby kid. The only way I ever kept it under control is I would when I played sports and things like that and was burning a whole lot of calories, right. And then and as an adult, it just got kind of worse and worse. I've had triple-digit weight losses 2 other times in my life. This is the 3rd time in my life. Now, this time, the other triple digits are like 102 pounds or whatever. Now, this time is, I lost 280 pounds. Right. And I'm hoping a decade on, right, that that has stuck this time, because it never did stick. It didn't stick this long ever before. Yeah. And so it really did. It took the gastric bypass, and it really took. I had to do the same thing with the food and tobacco addiction that I went through with the alcohol addiction, and maybe you'll understand this when I say it, and I mean this in sort of the very darkest way possible. Gastric bypass, when I decided to have gastric bypass, it was in the same way as you do at a poker table, it was an all-in bet for me. Right. And like I said, I mean this in the really darkest way possible. If I couldn't make that work, I don't, I might not still be here today. Right. And so it was just a thing. And so I never gave myself and you can call it a luxury or out or whatever you want to call it, of that it wasn't going to work. Gotcha. And having a gastric surgery, because you had a gastric bypass, I had a gastric sleeve. Having a gastric surgery is not easy. Right. A lot of people think that you're taking the easy way out, or that you're cheating, right? And it's really not true. That's right. It's a lot of work that goes into the surgery after the fact, because you're not only like cutting open your body and changing your physical anatomy, but you're also having to figure out a new lifestyle. That's right. I tell people that all the time. I said, if you think about anybody who's in the grips of any kind of addiction, it's like you're on a merry-go-round, right? And you're afraid to get off for a lot of reasons. One is you're afraid if you step off, you'll fall down. Yeah. The other is you're afraid that if you step off, it'll keep going and you won't be able to get back on, and that scares you to death, right? Not to have your addictive crutch to lean on. And with food, that's especially true. And I always say this to people, is food addiction is a really hard one to kick. As an alcoholic, right, you can stop.
Right.
You can make the decision and whatever tools you need to use for yourself, but you can make the decision and you don't ever have to have a drink again.
Right, right.
When you quit smoking, you don't ever have to smoke again. But a food addiction, the problem is that you got to have food. And so it's like if you told an alcoholic, okay, you got to get this under control, right? You got to have 3 drinks a day. You can't have 4 and you can't live on 2, but you got to have 3 and stop after 3.
That's very true.
And it is really hard because that is one addiction that you can't just not do anymore, not practice anymore. You have to control it.
Right. Most addictions lead to suicide, right? Or suicidal thoughts, tendencies.
Right.
Whereas food addiction, if you stop it, you're committing suicide right there.
Right.
So yeah, no, I can definitely understand that one.
So, but you're exactly right. I always tell people that the gastric bypass was like pushing the pause button. All it did is it gives you a window of time where you can take control of your addiction and where you can almost cold turkey, right? I went the first 6 months of just liquid.
Yeah.
For the most, first 6 months, 6 weeks of just liquids, and 0 calorie liquids, not sodas, but 0 calorie liquids, a whole lot of water, and so it gives you that time to make your decision, to get your lifestyle changed, and like I said earlier, I had 6 weeks of short-term disability from my work, and so I literally made the gym my job.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Did you find it at any point in time when you were, after your gastric surgery, that you had the tendency to like go back towards alcohol or towards cigarettes or find something else that was addictive? Or, because I know when I was going through my surgery, I had to go see a psychologist about my alcohol consumption at that point, because alcohol can really turn into an addiction when you have a surgery like this. And they were afraid of that for me, and that's what really catapulted me into my alcohol addiction. Did you find that you had some of those urges or anything like that at that point?
So we don't get to call cycling an addiction, right?
It's a marvelous obsession.
Okay, all right.
It's a marvelous obsession.
All right, good. So, because there are people who would say, in fact, a few years ago, the San Antonio Express News did a profile of me, and she chose to title it "Trading One," or or "Breaking the Cycle of Addiction," or something like that. And then in the lead, she said that I had sort of, that I kind of developed an addiction to cycling or whatever, and that has kind of got me it all, and so I do really kind of think about it, and I do take a little time to just kind of step back and see, okay, is that, and if it's an addiction, it's a healthy addiction at least, right? And it's good for me. And I certainly don't, if you look at sort of what constitutes addiction by definition, right? So for example, I don't think it makes me in any way neglect my family or my work responsibilities or, those kind of things. So if it's an addiction, it's okay, I like this obsession. But no, the smoking is the one that I still have a little bit, periodically, a little hard time with. I haven't smoked. I haven't had a cigarette in 10 years nearly. But the funny thing is that when I see somebody smoking, it looks like fun.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, oh man. Or sometimes if I see, like, I have never watched that series Mad Men. Because I tried to watch the first episode and like they're smoking in every scene of it. I was like, oh no, I can't do this, because that's all I do. I just look at it. I can't even. I'm not even following the plot. I'm just like, God,
it makes it look fun,
so
right?
good. And my problem. And now I will say, if I get anywhere near, like sometimes when I'm out cycling, people will drive by me and they're smoking. All I have to do is get a whiff of it, and that stops my craving in its tracks.
That's cool.
I'm not the least bit interested in it.
So almost appalled now.
Yes.
That's
so
good.
That part of it, it's the physical act of seeing somebody.
Yeah.
And I still, you have your triggers, right? And so I still, in fact, just yesterday I was having this conversation after Thanksgiving dinner, I sat there with my wife makes this butternut squash pie that's sugar-free. It is to die for. And so I was sitting there with my little piece of that and a cup of coffee, and I finished that up, and I drank that coffee, and I thought, cigarette. Go to the breast pocket, right? And I'm like, oh, God, no, I don't do that. But it was just that quick, just that little trigger just lasted in a little nanosecond, and then I was okay.
And you were good.
Yep.
You were good. Okay. Now let me ask you, who was it harder to admit to that you were an alcoholic or addict, you or someone else?
Honestly, I think it would be stupid to say someone else because they all knew. I think when you're an addict, you're the last one to know.
Yeah.
And you don't know this, so you said you were going to give me a question that was going to be hard. I'm going to tell you this, that you and I rode cycle together one time. And we stopped at a little convenience store, and I went in and had a sandwich at the Subway, and then came back out and was getting ready to leave, and I rode by, and you and a couple other guys were sitting out right in the parking lot where we just finished riding, drinking beer.
Yeah. Which is pretty typical for me.
And I was like, I won't say I was horrified, but the problem is that I had seen you drinking a lot. And so I actually, the next time I saw your wife, I actually had a conversation with her about that. I was concerned about how much I was seeing you drinking and how much drinking had become a part of your
existence
persona, right? Yeah. That who you were. And because like a lot of alcoholics, right? You craft your personality around the drinking, because that becomes a part of the world you build.
That's how I can make it socially acceptable for others, because they know that I like to drink.
That's right.
So
Right. And so I did. I had a conversation with your wife about it. I don't even know if she remembers that, but she and I had a conversation about it. So there you go.
All right.
Truth or dare.
That's no, right? Now I'm getting called out, but that's okay. That's okay, right?
Well, no, that was years ago.
That was a long while
That was
back.
probably 4 years.
I think that was right after my surgery, wasn't it?
Maybe.
Or soon after my surgery.
3 or 4 years ago, anyway.
And no, that was. I actually remember that time. I remember it very, very vividly, and I associate you with that memory because that is when I first realized that I really might have a problem, and that's when I started to question my actions. Of course, it didn't help me,
right? Well,
but
any journey starts with a step, right?
It made me question my actions.
Baby steps.
Okay, so how do you? You kind of already gone over this.
Oh, by the way, did I say it was 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday? Did I say that part?
10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday.
All right, go ahead. Sorry,
you buy beer at 7 o'clock in Texas.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. So how do you think you became an alcoholic?
I literally grew up with liquor everywhere. I mean, my parents bought liquor by the case. They lived in an environment. They were Mad Men, right? They were that Mad Men environment, right? Where everything was cocktails and now my family was not that. I mean, my more extended family, in fact, they were very conservative, teetotal and Southern Baptist kind of people, but my parents were not. And they just, every party started out with, okay, well, what are we going to drink, right? And then, oh yeah, we're probably going to have some food too.
Gotcha. So you grew up in an environment.
Yeah, I mean,
where it was just there.
I was drinking. I'm probably embarrassed with a lot of this stuff, but I remember things like everybody in my family smoked, and I can remember at being 3 or 4 years old walking by and picking a lit cigarette up out of an ashtray and taking a drag off of it, and everybody's like, oh, well, that's so cute. Look at him smoke that bread like he's smoking. Yeah. But then the drinking part was kind of the same thing because like I said, my parents bought alcohol by the case, and I would liberate just bottles of alcohol. I was the source for like all my friends, growing up and stuff. And, let's go catch an omelet and, let's get a quart of vodka out of his garage and we'll go up to the park and drink it or whatever. And that, it's just kind of where it started. And it was just a normal part of life. And I mean, I can remember because I always made their drinks for them. And you know how, I don't know, maybe you don't, but your parents learn how to manipulate you by saying things like, "Oh man, you make the best bourbon and branch water there is. Could you make me one of your special bourbon and branch waters?" And what they're really doing is just jacking and packing with you, so you'll go to the kitchen and do it, right?
Well,
Wait on
and
them.
you use the perfect word, manipulate.
Right.
Because us as alcoholics and addicts, we are masters at manipulation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah,
That's why so many addicts wind up, on the other side of the law, right? It's because they just become the masters at manipulating people and controlling that, and so that's a very fine line between,
sometimes they end up on the wrong side of the law, but then sometimes they end up being very successful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you have to be a master manipulator in order to progress in.
Yeah, but if you look at prison, but I'm just saying, if you look at prison populations, there are a lot of addicts in prison.
Right. Oh, for sure. And then you mentioned something about being embarrassed, and I gotta say to this, just because it's embarrassing to you doesn't mean that you're the only one that has felt that. When you were a kid, you picked up that cigarette and you picked up that first drink, and everybody clapped. I think, well, that happened to me as a kid too, and I think I was like 4, 5, 6, something like that, and my dad gave me the first sip of my beer or something
Right.
like that, and it's not necessarily embarrassing, but it's the truth.
It would be embarrassing to my family, I guess. Is what
Okay.
It's not embarrassing so much to me. It's embarrassing, I think, if those family members, any of them, were still alive, right? To
Gotcha.
watch a video of me kind of outing them. I mean, I'll be 60 years old next year, right? So I'm a little older than you are. So
Just a little bit.
I'm a little different kind of throwback generation.
Yeah, but I mean, embarrassing moments are embarrassing moments, and as alcoholics, addicts, we've all experienced those embarrassing moments, and the cool thing is we're not alone. What Mark has experienced as embarrassing, I most likely have done the same. Different levels of embarrassment or different levels of consequences, but we've almost lived the exact same life.
Well, and you don't have to be, the big thing is you don't have to be defined or owned by those moments in your life.
That's
right?
a perfect point. Thank you. That's a good one. Okay, so let's see. What were some consequences that you experienced as an alcoholic, and did they matter to you?
Matter now or matter then?
Matter then.
No. I'll just say this right straight up front. Every consequence mattered not. So, my current marriage is my 4th marriage.
Okay.
Again, not uncommon for addicts to run through spouses for a variety of reasons, right? One is they just get tired of putting up with your stuff, right?
Yeah.
But the other is that you build this wall this wall around your addiction, and it becomes your armor that you put on every day, because oftentimes that's what your addiction is, right? It's a way of self-medicating to get through the pain or whatever it is, just like armor would be to keep from arrows from or whatever. And so I ran through some spouses now, and you learn how to make all the jokes about it, right? Because I always say, well, okay, being married 4 times, it shows I'm not afraid of commitment, and I have a little spiel that I do, and I talk about, well, the first one was only 18 months, and it was a starter wife, and she would, I that was the time I was 19, and I thought you had to get married to get laid, so there you go. But so you make up all the little stories you can make up about them, but for the most part, I can chalk many of those up to my addictions, right, and to running from that addiction, and to in some cases not wanting to let them into that addiction. And so just all those, that whole thing was just kind of all mixed up together. And so at the time, of course I didn't,
You didn't care.
I didn't regret it. I was like, oh, well, yeah.
Now it's a little bit different.
You make sacrifices for your addiction, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's why I said, I think, I can't remember if I said this or not, but I consider myself like a passionate smoker, and nobody likes a quitter. So I constantly, would make excuses for myself. And you get angry at people who try to call you out on your addiction or who won't enable your addiction.
Yeah.
And so you pretty easily work it out in your own mind that person really doesn't care about you because all they want to do is talk about your addiction,
Your problems.
your problems.
Mm-hmm. Not the problems that they've created,
Right.
not the problems that they have,
Right.
but your problem. Yeah.
Right.
No, definitely understand that one. That's a valid point. Okay, so now 38 years sober, 10 years smoke free, 10 years with your food addiction, food free, not necessarily food free, but with your food addiction and the reps. What does your program look to stay recovered or in recovery? Whoever you want to put that.
Okay. Well,
What's your program look like?
Well, okay, so let me deal with the alcohol first. And I realize that when you go to meetings, right, they kind of coach you to say, or to think of yourself as always in recovery, right, and whatever. But I honestly, and somebody out there is an addiction counselor, right, and watching this and saying, oh man, he is in for a fall. He is really setting himself up. But after 38 years, I can't imagine the circumstances under which I would choose to take a drink.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And if there ever comes a time when suddenly something happens and I feel like that, I feel like I have the sort of skills now to know how to get through that and get past that.
The tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, because I don't have the physical cravings anymore.
Okay.
I don't, even when there's a good excuse, right?
Yeah.
Even pressure to drink, I'll pass on it. I won't drink that like glass of champagne at somebody's wedding. Even at my own daughter's wedding, I wouldn't drink a glass of champagne, right? So that we had to figure out how to do something else in my class. And I won't, I've had, when I used to travel for business a good bit, and I would be like in Germany and somebody would give me this counseling and say, well, if you don't drink, right, at least a beer, then people won't trust you. And I said, well, I guess they won't trust me, right? Because I can't imagine ever choosing to drink.
Right.
The smoking thing we talked about, it looks good to me, but all I got to do is get close to it. And every once in a while, I still do the pocket check, my triggers.
It's kind of habit.
The food thing, again, I'm 10 years out. That's the one I probably would say that I'll never completely get over because it is a constant monitoring and moderating process when you're a food addict. You never, like I said, you can't just not do it, right? And so you're constantly having that conversation with yourself. And okay, a perfect example, I was at Costco just this afternoon. And now I will sometimes do the little sample things, that they're giving out just for fun, right? And just because I can have one bite of something and that's okay. But today, the one bite weird thing was they took this little good smoked ham and put it on top of these scalloped potatoes, and something about the flavor of those two things together that triggered some like comfort food memory back there to me of ham and scalloped potatoes back there, some, I don't know, white boy meal way back there in my past, sitting down at my table or something at Christmas time. And I was just like, whoa. And it was so compelling to me that I went back around to look at the ham. And fortunately, my wife has migraine headaches, and one of her triggers is nitrites that are in most preserved processed meats. Okay. And I looked at it and had nitrite in it. I was like, oh, whew. Okay, I don't have to worry about having ham and scalloped potatoes for a meal this week. So the food triggers will always be there, and because you can't
escape it.
Right, you just can't not do it, and so
you can hide from almost everything else. Well, not really, because booze and smoking is everywhere in today's society. But you can kind of shield yourself from that. You can't shield yourself from food.
That's right. And we just got through Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
And the holidays are always a minefield for any kind of food. And so one of the things that I do, because I know it's a minefield, is like this week, the week of Thanksgiving, I rode extra to bank calories so that I would be able to have some calories in the bank, so that if I did choose to have, and now let's just say like a piece of my wife's butternut squash pie,
Yeah.
or that, by the way, is really healthy, has really good things in it, and is very low cal and very low fat and whatever. But I still had a piece of it. In fact, I think I did. I had 2 pieces yesterday, but I knew that because I had banked over 5,000 calories.
Right.
And I had, a slice of turkey breast for lunch, and some green beans, and just kind of little, not crazy stuff for lunch. So.
Okay.
And I weigh every day.
You weigh every day.
Every day.
Oh wow.
Every day.
I was doing
and considering a victory that I'm not weighing 2 or 3 times a day. Let's just say. There was a time
where you were doing that.
There was a time where I was on the scale.
So you went from like an alcohol, food addiction to like this. At that point, it was probably almost considered an unhealthy addiction for you to exercise and weigh yourself.
I had to back off. I had to learn how to weigh only once a day. And some people would still tell me that's unhealthy. Every once in a while I run across a fitness book or something that says, throw the scale away, right? Judge it based on how your clothes feel or whatever. But I know, for me, I'm 6'5".
Right.
And my body is even 10 years out, is still a really efficient fat storage device.
Okay.
And I can, and this is just, I guess I'll just probably deal with it the whole rest of my life. But I know that if you and I walked out of here and you said, Mark, let's just go on a food binge. And if for some ungodly, unknown reason, I said, okay, let's go on a food binge. That I could, in the matter of 2 or 3 days, probably put on 15 pounds.
Oh wow. Okay.
If I really chose to do that.
So your body is really efficient at storing fat.
Oh man. So I weigh every day, and if I'm a pound or 2 over where I want to be, then I back off the next day, and until I get it back.
But I tell you, I did that when I was training for my half Ironman. I was weighing myself every day, and I have a healthy scale to where it measures my BMI and my body fat and my hydration and all that. And it was really cool seeing the efforts and almost that immediate gratification that we all, as alcoholics and addicts, want and crave. It was great to see that immediate gratification, or to have that up and drop. And then as soon as it didn't, it was like, what the hell's wrong with me? Like, am I broken? I didn't exercise enough yesterday. I didn't exercise, good enough, or I ate too much or whatever. And so I can definitely understand where that comes into play, because there was a point when I first started training for my triathlons where, I was soon after my quitting alcohol, I started to weigh myself multiple times throughout the day. Because I would wake up, I would weigh myself, I would work out, I'd weigh myself, I'd work out again, I'd weigh myself, and then I'd go to bed and I'd weigh myself. And it became bad. And so I
chart mine.
Yeah.
I have an Excel sheet. That's my weight for the last 10 years. Every day. Multiple times.
But again, it's not necessarily an unhealthy addiction.
And I look at different things too, and I'm looking, like I said, some of it is not so much. It just is a way of, as you said, in some ways, reinforcing or telling myself.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to kind of get into the fun stuff. Okay. So what got you into cycling besides going to the gym and all that? Like, what really kept you cycling, I should say?
Well, it literally hits all the cylinders for me. I'm a bit of an introvert, and so I know I compensate well.
Sorry about that one.
I compensate well for it.
Okay.
But I am naturally an introvert.
Okay.
And cycling is the perfect regenerative activity for me, because it is largely solo.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so I get out on my bike and just ride, and I really like that. I love data, and so all that sort of analytics about cycling and stuff like that, I kind of enjoy that. Although surprisingly, I know people who are way more into that than I am.
Oh man, Training Peaks. I don't know if you
Yeah,
have Training
no,
Peaks,
I'm-
but dude,
I don't know.
Training Peaks is like my
Well,
best
and
friend.
now that's the other thing. I don't do a trainer at all because we tried it. We got a trainer at the house and I set it up, and it was like, in fact, I say that trainer miles are like dog years, right? 7-1. And I just can't do it. I will ride in almost any kind of condition rather than get on
Yeah.
a trainer.
You know, I use the trainer myself just because on certain days. My long days, I'll be out on the road. But like if I'm doing interval training or hill training, you know, it's hard to find that exact same spot every time. Or I hate doing repeats because it's so boring. And it's, you know, you go up a hill, you come down. You go up a hill, you come down. Just to get that training. When I was training for my half Ironman, that's what I had to do.
Now, see,
And-
if you're saying the hill repeats are boring, but the trainer is not as boring.
But see, I would throw a movie on, you know, and I would just sit there and I would go like, and all of a
play an
sudden,
audiobook in my ear.
I can't do audiobooks. I get bored. I get bored with the books. I gotta have something visually appealing. I guess that's the ADD in
It's
my.
the scenery.
That's why I don't like running inside.
Oh,
It's,
now see,
you know,
I don't. That's one of the reasons I don't like running. One of the reasons I like cycling is because things change much more quickly.
quicker. So,
The running is, sorry, runners, running is boring.
yeah.
Mind-numbingly boring.
Yes. Even though I've yeah.
And I hear people talk about, oh, you get in the zone, and I don't get any zone. I just the whole time. I'm just
You know you do, but it's like, man, it's like going by slow. It's just a slow-mo movie the whole way through.
Right.
And yeah.
And cycling, it keeps my mind active. When you're cycling, if you don't cycle, you don't understand this, but you're constantly moving, you're constantly checking the traffic, you're constantly looking here, looking there, looking ahead of you, looking behind you, looking at either side of you, paying attention to what your speed is, what your cadence is, what your heart rate is, what your, all those things, right? That there is a constant stream of information
Right.
coming at you, and that's what does it for me with cycling.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. So you've actually answered, my next question was why do you cycle? And it's a lot of the analytics, the scenery, the health benefits.
Well, and I do ride with people from time to time. I don't mean to say it's a totally solo thing. I mean, I have ridden with Team Wingman before, and I meet people on a regular basis. And sometimes one of the things I do is I kind of try to mix it up. So, like for example, tomorrow we're doing this, and we're taping this on a Friday. Tomorrow's a Saturday. So tomorrow I'll meet a group for like the first part of the ride, and they all know that.
You're going to peel off.
That I'm going to at some point, that I'm going to peel off and go somewhere else, and they're fine with that. In fact, I oftentimes will announce and say, if anybody wants to go, come on, let's go. And people are like, no, you're the crazy man.
You just rode 20 miles to meet us here. We're riding 30 miles, and you're going to go ride some more. That's when I ride with you. That's what I think, because and I ride a lot, but you ride a lot.
Well, and I do, and now and sometimes I don't ride with people because one of the groups I ride with quite a bit, the HEB cycling team, they ride like out of Cibola. Well, that's 30 miles from my house, so and they want to leave at 8:00. So that means I gotta get up and be on the road by 6:00 just to make sure I'm not holding them up, because you never know what you're going to hit in terms of lights or, like construction that you got to reroute and go somewhere else or whatever. So I don't want to be late. So and this time of year, for example, 6 o'clock in the morning, it not only is it dark, but it's cold.
Yeah, that's true.
So I got to figure out how to get enough layers on to be comfortable at 40 degrees and still be maybe comfortable at 75 degrees.
Right.
Later on.
Without having to carry so much.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So, what are some of the benefits that you've come to love about cycling? Besides meeting me.
Well, there's meeting you, right? It is really efficient exercise, which appeals to me. I can, in 90 minutes of cycling, do much harder and get much more efficient. This won't surprise anybody. Calorie burn in 90 minutes than I can running, walking, treadmilling, weightlifting or whatever it is, right? Because that to me makes it very efficient for me,
Okay.
a very efficient workout. The other thing too with cycling is I really like it. It is both an individual and a group thing, right?
Yeah.
So I can do, if I decide at almost any given time, and in San Antonio, I can go and find a group, right, that's going to ride somewhere, sometime, anytime I'm kind of wanting to go ride.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that. It's something you can do in small groups. It's something you can do in large groups. Over the years, over the almost 10 years that I've been cycling, somebody was asking me the other day. I think I've raised about, I don't know, a lot of money, $35,000 for charity.
Nice.
All different kinds of charities.
Okay.
And I think that's being conservative. That's not counting all the T-shirt rides that part of the proceeds go to charity. I'm talking about just actual fundraising charity rides, whether it's the MS ride or whether it's the Tour de Cure ride or whatever.
Right.
I mean, I've been involved with Tour de Cure since 2009, and I've actually, been what they call a champion every year in Tour de Cure.
Nice.
And so I enjoyed that aspect of it, although I have kind of cut back a little bit because I feel like I'm constantly tapping the same donor pool.
Yeah.
And I call it like standing on the donor street corner,
You're cannibalizing all your friends where they're running away from you
That's
already.
right. People are saying, oh, God, here he comes, Walmart.
No, I feel you, man. That's why I started doing like all the stupid stuff that like crocheting, right? Like that's all I started crocheting because I can give someone something to get donations.
At least it feels a little different than just give me money. Right?
Exactly.
And I'm actually they stopped the ADA Diabetes Association has pulled out of the San Antonio and market, and only Dallas and Houston and Texas. Well, I have a Tour de Cure from now until the foreseeable future, I guess. So I really like to the extent possible for my dollars to donate, my charity dollars to stay in the community. Mm-hmm. So next year I'm going to actually switch to the MS ride.
Oh, nice.
So,
okay. Well, I got a perfect team for you to ride.
You're not the only person who says that, and so I do. I will likely be with Team Wingman. Susan Story, if you're watching this, I know I told you that. So
all right. So now we're coming to the last question.
Oh, this is the surprise.
This is the surprise question. So, what did your addiction destroy forever?
Relationships with some of the people who were in my life at that time that I just won't ever get back.
Okay.
And sadly, two of those people are my children, and they were their mother and I divorced when my daughter was about 5 or 6, and my son was about 2.
Okay.
And all 3 of my addictions played a role in that, and they played a role in my. It's a really long story, but I didn't see them as much as I should have in those early years.
Gotcha.
And so I think my daughter and I have kind of come to some understanding about it a little bit. My son and I haven't, and maybe never will.
Okay.
And so those are, relationships with the people are the things that I probably won't ever completely get back that were broken. I won't say destroyed. Destroyed is kind of that ultimate thing,
word, yeah.
But broken, right?
Okay.
In such a way that they probably won't ever. And you can't, for those people who have young children, you don't ever get that time back.
Right.
You don't ever get that time back, right?
Okay.
You just don't. I mean, and so, and I'm not, I just admitted, right, that I didn't, and so I'm not trying to, guess I'm saying do what I say to do, right? Do
Yeah.
what I say, not what I did, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the relationships, the people part of it is the part that gets broken. That's really, really hard to fix, I think.
Okay.
And I hope that I mean I hope that's not just a unique thing for me. I think that's
No, it's definitely. I think it's pretty widespread, you know. And I hate to like minimize what you just said
Right.
from you, but I've talked with a lot of other alcoholics and addicts to where that is something that they miss the most, you know. And you know, like my dad, for example, you know, the addict that he was or is, that you know, he had while he was dealing with his addiction, he lost a lot of time with me and my two older sisters, you know. And so that's something that has plagued and will continue to plague addicts and alcoholics. Hopefully they can rebuild those relationships or start early in building those relationships to where they start to mend. So
well, the problem is that you, in some ways, you regenerate that, right? You I don't mean you regenerate the relationship. I mean that you cause your problems to be passed on.
yeah,
in some
that's
ways.
true.
So
That's true. So, all right. Well, we've come to the end of our question session.
good deal.
I want to really thank you very much, Mark,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
coming by and
I enjoyed
swinging
the
by.
conversation.
So, and I hopefully, you know, you watching this, you've gathered some information from Mark. You know, he's not telling you. I never tell you what to do. We can only make our suggestions, and we can only tell you what's affected us in our lives and how we live our lives now. Hopefully, you know, you can get some information and gain some understanding as far as why we do what we do and why we did what we did. You know, so that's about it. You know, we got Mr. Mark Noblet here and Live Bandit, and we're out.
Thanks, Reed.
So, thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir.